Okay, then you may begin.
They're just going to start.
Hello guys, my name is PB.
My name is Luke.
And today we're going to talk about the ways in which ads are sexualized. So the question we decided to focus on is, why do ads contain sexualized content?
Well, you probably have seen a couple of advertisements where you see a beautiful young man or woman alongside the product, but usually really with the product sometimes being rather obscure, and well, you sometimes having text alongside it. For example, say talking about the beauty of something or how good it is, which sometimes makes you think that almost has to do more with the model themselves than with the product.
And so we'll talk about this first ad. To give you a bit of context, this is obviously a Burger King ad, as shown here. And the model that you see before you, she actually sued she was very mad at the company as she posted a blog on YouTube. There is something very wrong with the fact that they felt entitled to do that to my face without signing a contract with me. I believe in sexual expression in art and the media. It's beautiful and necessary for a healthy society, but it must be consensual, otherwise it's rape. So obviously she was not very happy with it. And it's clearly seen that when you step back and look into the bigger picture, it generally gives you the idea of blowjob, and it's highlighted very much by the word blow. And you can see that the burger here is a 7-incher, and it's going directly into her mouth. And so we can see that although they most likely didn't mean it to be so sexual, it turned out to be interpreted as sexualization by people, the common man.
Also, with the way that's the burger or the sandwich, I'm not really sure if it's a burger or a sandwich, the way that it is located says basically gives a message of that it'll taste almost as good as sex, which again has to do with the sense of sexualization in ads, especially since the thing, if it isn't this that you're focused on, it'll be these two words right here. It'll blow, like blow job, basically pretty easy to draw the connections. But okay.
Yeah. This is one example of how the media uses shock advertising. But we'll get into that later. And the color, some of the color aspects we can look at is brown, and brown kind of symbolizes, it's obviously the same. It's the same color as the sandwich, and it's kind of showing how they're kind of trying to blend into how Luke said it'll taste just as good as, it'll be as good as sex, and how the burger and they're kind of interconnected in a way. And so, yeah.
Here is one that shows the sexualization of someone from the opposite gender. For example, here you see a man and a man half naked lying down next to what's probably supposed to be a product, and then in big words it says, "Look at this gorgeous air freshener." Then in small words next to each other, "Gorgeous man." The word gorgeous basically has to do with beautiful, as as females would, as they see it, would probably usually focus on this, and if this were removed, you would probably be thinking that it has to do with fashion or something, since the product right here is really obscure compared to the entire man right here. Also, to draw them to the product, It's the only part that isn't in monochrome, in monochrome colors. Also, if you look at the text here again, this smaller part, right, it starts off big right here, and then it gets smaller. And with the stripes right here, um, basically say with first look at this, then look at this. Basically drawing comparisons with saying of you like what you see here, it'll be as good as if you buy this.
But what's very funny about it is that when you first look at the ad, you would see the man, and then you see the product here. But then, in the order in which they want you to look at it, is they want you to look at the air freshener and then the man. So, as I mentioned before, these ads are an example of how the media uses shock advertising. And shock advertising is a way in which firms advertise their products in a way that goes against the societal norms.
Yeah, for example, in some cases, the literal objectification of women, basically almost turning them into the product itself. Then there is like the empowerment of, the empowerment of men, as shown in these pictures where the female is shown to be held down or in a sexual position, or in a submissive position, as as shown in here, and much more clearly right here, being surrounded by all the other men.
So let's look at this Dolce and Gabbana ad. This ad was made in 2009, and what we can see here is there's 4 men and 1 woman, and the fact that there are 4 men and 1 woman is supposed to give off the idea of, it gives off the idea of male dominance, and the idea of male dominance is also highlighted by the blue sky in the background, as blue represents, like the ocean, kind of dominance over the whole area. It just represents dominance in general.
Also with, for example, the suits from suit advertisements from the other presentation, it shows the submission of women as usually showing a lot of skin. But here, while the woman is still clothed, it still shows her being dominated by other men. The same can be seen in this one right here by the American Apparel, where it shows a man holding 2 women by the legs. While it might not show a lot of sexualization, it does show the empowerment of the opposite gender, as the man is shown holding up the woman. And if you were to switch perspectives and the way that the woman's legs are positioned, it would in the position would basically be almost like a sexual position with the man on top of the woman. But it also also the suit that he's wearing is basically meant to show an everyday male, showing that it doesn't have to be anyone special, that it can be anyone who's normal.
And for this ad, going back to it, the fact that there are 4 men and 1 woman, many people interpret it as gang rape, and this ad received a lot of heavy criticism just because of the way they portrayed their product as an ad. So some of the ways that people are sexualized in ads, there's 2 main ways. One is objectification,
as stated before, and and what's usually in the ads is Photoshop images, since a lot of these men and women look way too beautiful than what normal people look like. as as people usually with Photoshop, their proportions are changed to fit with the desired shape of what a man or woman might like. For example, with man, it is a lot of muscle, or at least thin, somewhat muscle, so and also we're looking really handsome. While with women, it is of course with the beauty factor with thin waist, um, thin waist, um, thin waist, larger curves, and no blemishes on anywhere on the skin. Um, the, the the reasoning behind the sexualization, as stated before, it is meant to draw in people of the opposite sex. As for example, with the first image, it shows the woman. It showed a woman about to bite into the hamburger in a way that makes it look like a blowjob. But with burgers, it's usually advertised for men, as men are usually the ones that would eat at places like Burger King, or at least are one of the more are one of the higher demographics. And also, it is the sexualization is also used to draw more attention towards the product itself, basically saying it is it'll be just as good as having as sex with a beautiful person. So.
And so, is the use of these, like the eye candy, which is essentially the way that
the appeal of the appeal of the actors and the appeal of the actors for the from the advertisements to the general democratic.
yeah, and the objectification of men and women and photoshopped images, it can be seen that through these techniques, the idea that sex sells is a very well, it's a very controversial way to advertise your one's product in the mass media. Thank you very much.
Comments or questions from the audience?
What do you think the purpose was of the advertisement? Like maybe entertainment in the first one, but like in the shop advertisements, was there more of an entertainment purpose, or was there more of an informative purpose?
For example, with the men's advertisement, those shock images are usually meant to give men some sort of power fantasy, as a lot of men want to be powerful, and those advertisements would usually or at least would play into that power fantasy, but sometimes would showing a bit too much of a rapey scene.
Do you know if these 4 advertisements, were they successful when they came out? Like, did they draw a lot of attention?
I think, well, in terms of getting publicity for it, they were successful, but in terms of being able to sell their product or the kind of criticism that they got, it wasn't, it backfired on them.
There was also the negativity of that stuff, and that the shock advertisements would sometimes influence the younger audience to act more violent towards women, or at least act more violently towards women. Yeah.
Do you think that the shock advertisements, the advertisement, people from the advertising, did they want to change after they got the critique, or is that their purpose or part of their brand to promote like that?
I think in terms, at least for some of the fashion brands like Dolce & Gabbana, I think that after seeing the criticism that they got, they did want to change, because obviously that's not the kind of outlook that any firm or brand would want to have on their product. Like, nobody would want to be associated with like a sexy outlook.
Yeah, since people usually tend to stay away from advertisements or brands that have a bad reputation behind them. So yeah, if they receive negative criticism, then it might usually lead to them wanting to change.
Can you go back to the very first ad, the Burger King one? PB, when you were presenting, you said at one point in your presentation that they didn't intend for it to be sexual. And I'm going to argue with that, and I think that was very clearly their intention.
Yeah, it was. It was not the intention. It was most likely not the intention of the actress herself.
Yeah, it wasn't.
As he stated before, since it's clearly shown that it was done on purpose.
Yeah.
The model didn't know what she was quite getting into, and that's why she put the comment that she said, saying she was mad that they didn't let her know what she was getting into before she got in. They put her face on it without having her sign a contract that she's giving consent to do so.
As this is again shown with the photoshopped images, so it would be easy to just Photoshop it, the face there, Photoshop the burger there, plain backgrounds, and then just put a title in front of it.
Mm-hmm. So, clearly, this is a clear sexual illusion, right? And you made that point. So what do you think is if you look at their intention, what is the reaction that they're hoping to achieve in the target, in various audiences?
Well, for example, with the younger audience, it's basically, or at least with the young adults to teenagers, it is meant to pull them in with the thoughts of that it'll taste just as good as the feeling of sex.
Mm-hmm.
While the general message is supposed to be with it is really good, but with the way it is presented, it's shown that it's most likely targeted towards the male demographic, especially the younger males. Not the kids, of course, because they probably don't even know what's going on.
I think that's a good point, yeah. But how would a small child who doesn't get what's going on?
They probably just think it'll blow your mind away. If they know what those words mean in a sentence, then they probably think it's really good. And since they most likely don't really even know what a blowjob is, they won't be able to draw the comparison between those two words.
So what are the various people? So the various people who do know what a blowjob is, how are we going to react?
Well, as Luke said before, for youngsters, it's in a way more a bit.
For some people, it varies from person to person. Some might be disgusted with the advertisements, some are attracted to it, and some just don't really mind it.
Right. What about just in this room? Yeah, Jamie.
Well, I think for the people that do understand, I think it's meant to create this or evoke humor from the audience, because humor is a common technique used in advertisements that attract the target audience.
Yep.
And it being, you said it was a 7-inch burger?
Yes.
Maybe that idea of is meant for an older audience.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of sexual joke in here, right? Herman.
Yeah, so I agree with Jamie in the way that, all these ads might be sexualized, but the other ones, they sell the product through actually sexualizing it, and this is more as a joke. So there is a difference between the two types of sexualized advertisements.
I have a question.
Yeah?
Do you find it effective?
I find it effective in getting publicity for it, but
it doesn't really make me want to buy.
Do you want that sandwich?
If you take, it does look tasty, but no.
I'm a vegetarian.
That's my answer too, Phoebe. Roxanne.
I think the main argument isn't about it, adults, about the child thinking that is normal.
Yeah.
It's normalizing it, that's what people argued that it was wrong from Burger King, not the adults to sing a joke about
Yeah, there are more people are more mad with Burger King than they are at the model, because the model obviously didn't know what she was getting into when she did it.
Right, that point's been made, that's fine. So, Jack?
Yeah, you keep talking about how people reacted. Would you know any examples of how they reacted outside the act, or how did the media react to this ad?
Jamie?
Can I go into a different point? Something that I've seen that seems pretty important in a lot of the ads that you've shown is the structure. And one of you said before, how the text on the side tries to create, on the second ad, how it tries to create almost a map of how to look, but us in the Western world, when we read photos or just read books, we go from top to bottom and left to right. And here you see the initial shock factor of this, and then the sandwich, and then the text contextualizes it. And also in the second one, you see the person first, and that's why we initially have the thought of the gorgeousness of the advertisement.
Yeah, definitely it has that effect. I think that contributes a lot to that shock factor, right? That the way we read the poster. Sorry?
Going on structure, I think in that about from American Apparel, what do you think the effect is of that? The fact that there's no faces, it's just we just assume, you guys assume that it was a man holding a woman, but what's the effect of not having faces?
Right.
And just having a body?
It's basically the fact that there's no faces allows men to fantasize, at least just put their own any face on there that they want. Any face of a man and then a woman. So basically creating a bit of a, again, as we said before, a bit of a power fantasy for the man.
Yep. And we talked a lot about that. It dehumanizes, right? It's a body part. And so it's not a full human being. It's just a representative body part of that human being. And so, therefore, power and power through sex can be exhibited, because you don't get the human behind the whole thing. So that's, yeah.
What do you think the purpose was for the background in the Dolce & Gabbana advertising?
I think as I said before, the blue represents male dominance, and so in this case they're advertising a type of male clothing.
Also, now that I think about it, with those buildings, with those buildings right there, or I think they're not supposed to be buildings, since there's no one else around them, it basically gives a bit of a feeling of isolation, that they're all by themselves, which again gives it a bit of a gang rapey feel.
Yeah, they can get away with it because there's nobody to call them from it, right? I'm going to stop you now because I want to move on to the next one. Thank you very much, guys.
Hello, my name is Nick and this is Roxanne, and our presentation is going to be about the presidential advertising between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So first we're going to show you the video. Just click the link. It'll be up shortly.
It's okay.
This would be a good moment for tea and coffee.
Improvisation.
Just press on.
Okay. So here it is.
Okay.
And you can tell them to go themselves. I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's incredible. When Mexico sends its people, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. You can see there was blood coming out of her eyes. blood coming out of her, wherever. You're going to see this guy, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. Please don't lie, I don't remember.
Our children and grandchildren will look back at this time, at the choices we are about to make, the goals we will strive for, the principles we will live by, and we need to make sure that they can be proud of us. I'm Gloria Clinton, and I approve this message.
So this was the commercial that Hillary Clinton and her advertisement team made, and it was placed on her YouTube channel. And this is was one of her most common uses of showing the people her stuff and her advertising as well as on the TV.
Slide it over. The tab.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so this video is a persuasive advertising. Its purpose is mainly for Hillary's campaign, but also to bring awareness to the general Americans about the impact that Trump's ideas and vocabulary would have on their children. And it's the target audience is apparent to two main parts. So first is the general American parents, which are generally or just a general Americans who is watching this. And it's generally separated in two parts, which is first the Trump supporters who are bringing awareness to what Trump may have an impact on their children. And in another way could also be that for Hillary supporters is a proof that they have chosen the right candidate.
So one of the quotes that we heard that Donald Trump says was, "I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this. They'd be carried out in a stretcher, folks." So a little more context is during one of his campaign presentations, there was someone who interrupted him, and he was mentioning that in the old days, if someone were to do something so disrespectful as interrupting him during his speech, they'd be taken away, but he also mentions that they'd be beat up and taken away, which is very contrasting to what Donald Trump's image is of that he doesn't condemn violence and that he doesn't like violence. So the commercial ad shows that what he says is almost as a contrast of what he believes in, showing that he can't really be trusted to keep his word and say what he has to choose. And they put this over the showing of the faces of the children, because throughout the video they show that he uses vulgar language and that he's inconsiderate about people that are listening to him and that are watching him. And children are the best example for this, because they soak up the information and they don't know what to do with it. They think if he says something is right, that it's right, because he's such a strong, powerful figure and someone to follow.
And also, as Nick said, that he was interrupted by supporters, and that's what he said. He also characterized Trump as a radical person, impatient, and also by saying he loved the old days, someone who doesn't like changes, which is, we can say later, which is the opposite of what Hillary Clinton will be described as. And the video here, as Nick said, the four different images of different children are shown. The surrounding of the children is pitch dark. The only light comes from the TV, which is a strong image. The idea that the only almost has a metaphor that TV is the only source of information that these children have. And also the main focus in this quote has been this child which represents the Latin American, which is what Trump target is, which is those children, in contrast between how the children perceive as innocently fragile, and how what he says in front of those kind of children has an impact on them.
So another interesting part of the campaign, just Hillary Clinton's campaign in general, as this is her ad, is that there were a lot of parts where many thought she couldn't be trusted, as there was lots of foul play throughout her campaign. But an interesting part throughout this advertisement is when they mention, and you can when they voice over Donald Trump to say, and you can tell them to go beat themselves. So this wasn't actually what he said. They put it over his voice during a different speech that he was having. So they put these words over what he was mouthing to make it sound like he was saying this, which was a huge questionable act for the commercial ad, because she's not using valid information. She's using information that they created to portray a negative image of Donald Trump, which got a lot of critique from the media and from people.
And the idea that a person with such an authority as Hillary, who would be a candidate to become president, uses what media has been criticized for a lot of years now, which is putting information out of context. And by doing this in front in her commercial, again goes with what Nick says, that she's argued has been not trustworthy. Again, two children are shown while this quote is playing. This children was the one that was represented by the eye in the first quote, which shows that the idea that the children are still watching after such a horrible quote that Trump already said. The children are still watching and are still hearing those kind of things. And the main focus of this quote images is the two children. By having the teddy bear and the idea that they seem to be naked shows again this idea of like the children being innocent, and again this negative impact that this kind of language would have on them. During that quote, Trump was during that video, Trump was in full screen just 2 times. One time was during this quote, and they showed that it was in live. So this idea, by saying that he was swearing, the idea that it cannot be censored in a live, that the children would just absorb what Trump says, represent what Hillary's point is that he's not worthy of being a president, and he will have a negative impact on the children.
So moving on to the next image and quote that he says is, "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody. I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible." So this is of course not the image we'd want to give our next generation and the children. I mean, children are very vulnerable. They'll take in information and they might not know exactly what to do with it. So you can make them believe something maybe which is not true. For instance, this is not something that the children should want to believe, that it's okay to kill somebody or harm somebody and not have a problem with it, that it's okay. And this is what Hillary Clinton is trying to show, that Donald Trump is inconsiderate of who's watching, and he doesn't have a filter, and he just says what he wants to say and what he actually believes, even though it could be harming, say, children who wouldn't exactly understand what he means. They'll just think that it's okay for him to kill someone, and that maybe they could do the same.
The point that Nick says is emphasized by the image, which is the image that is generally shown to represent this advertising. So the children is directly watching Trump, which is really strong, the idea that he is directly impacted, and also the idea that it's dark except Trump's on TV, and also that the blinds are closed, show that he doesn't have any other information than what Trump says, and again being alone add to that he just absorbs Trump's words.
So a big question about Donald Trump's campaign was what's he going to do with Mexico? Is he going to build a wall? Is he going to allow Mexicans to come in? Is he going to allow people to cross the border? And Hillary Clinton decides to use this to her advantage in the campaign. She mentions one of the quotes that Donald Trump said. When Mexico sends its people, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're bringing rapists. So, like I mentioned before, he speaks with a lot of vulgarity and with no filter. He says what he believes. And the portraying of the Mexican or Latina girl shows how saying such a thing could harm her and harm everyone, and that it won't be overlooked, and it gives her a negative feeling. Even though in all the images, all the children's faces are blank and they're in shock and in awe, you can kind of tell that she's starting to maybe question her family and herself, and she's thinking maybe, is she a bad person because he's saying this?
So there is one negative point we could talk about for the advertising of Hillary's advertising, which is we observed that the children were always in the dark area, was always heavy environment and atmosphere, but suddenly you see a child with which is bright around him and which looks really healthy and lively, which is the opposite of what Hillary's interpretation of the word and the impact that this quote will have on the children. And so it contrasts with her purpose of the advertising.
So the next quote Donald Trump uses, they use a lot of Donald Trump's quotes, is, you can see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her everywhere. So this is the vulgarity, this is the connection to the vulgarity of what Donald Trump says, and how the children are watching. The children aren't used to such vulgarity and such gore, that he's mentioning that blood is coming out of her everywhere in her eyes, and it's such a negative image that he's putting into the people who are listening's head. And Hillary Clinton is trying to show that it's not just adults or different cultures or different religions, but it's children, and children are easily influenced by this because they have a wild imagination, and they could picture this, and it could be really bad for the children.
For this quote, the main focus was on the black child. In America, the black people generally represent violence. They're generally presented in the media as violent people. So by presenting this black child in front of this, when saying this quote, shows the impact that a child who is innocent, who doesn't know the stereotype that people may have on him, would link it to him, which contrasts with his idea of innocence. And by using two children laying down with the slang, shows this idea of like it may be normalized, this kind of idea, and because they're just eating, just laying on their on the floor. So it shows again the danger and the impact that it may have on the children.
So when they showed two children in the complete darkness and just enlightened their face by the screen, we get the quote from Donald Trump where he says, "You got to see this guy. I don't know what I said. I don't remember." He's going like, "I don't remember." So this is when Donald Trump was mocking the reporter. There was a reporter that was handicapped that was attempting to get a normal interview with Donald Trump, but clearly this wasn't something that Donald Trump found amusing or something that he thought was good or necessary. So he actually made fun of it during one of his speeches in the South Carolina rally in November 2015. So this was quite a long time ago. And he uses a man with disability, and he uses that almost as to strengthen himself and portray his power to the people that were all around him and clapping, which is really not a good thing to be portraying to people, and especially not children who are listening.
But this has a lot of controversy because basically between the conversation that Trump had and the discussion that they had, it was argued that Trump did not meant to make fun of the reporter an an handicapped person, but more to mock him as a person who was unable to do his job in a stressful situation. Of course, I emphasize the word meant because you could argue that this quote, the person who was targeted by it did not think twice about what he meant. And even if it was just a meant, he is a representative of the maybe a representative of the American people being his president. So doing such a thing is bad representation for the children, which again are just observing those two children, not just observing the TV. Like it seems to be really close to the TV, so they are really implicated and focused to the TV. So it emphasizes this idea that it shouldn't be said. So for the second time, Trump was represented in a full screen. This part is really important because during this part they literally shrank the video of Trump. So it shows this idea that his comments are petite. He doesn't. They are unworthy to be president. So unconsciously it leads the audience to think that of the president and unworthy to be a representative for America and shown to the children.
And then one of the most maybe eye-catching moments or phrases was, "Our children are watching." This, of course, is throughout the video we see mainly children just staring at the video screens in shock or kind of with a blank face, and they're watching, seeing what Donald Trump is saying. And Hillary Clinton is attempting to show that he's not someone that they should look up to, is not someone that should be the one leading the country, and that everyone is watching, and that everyone is influenced, and that he can't just say whatever he wants to say. He has to be considerate of other people.
And this idea emphasized that having a black background and this white ground, which is almost bold. So it emphasized the importance of the impact that Trump is having and the importance of the yes.
So what example will we set for them? This is this was more or less the main question that Hillary Clinton was asking the people that are watching the ad and the video, the ad commercial. What example will we set for them? So she's questioning if Donald Trump is someone that can set an example for the next generation, our children, or even the current generation. Is he someone that people can look up to? Is he someone that is aware of other people and the differences around him, and he can adapt? So she's questioning his ability to lead the country.
And by having again the same idea of like a black background, the front of the sentence being almost being white and bold shows that the reflection that the normal Americans has is as important as the idea that children are watching what Trump is saying.
So in the end, we see Hillary Clinton talking at one of her speeches, and people in the background clapping and cheering. And she mentions, "Our children and grandchildren will look back at this time, at the choice we are about to make, the goals we strive for, the principles we live by, and we need to make sure that they can be proud of us." So she's asking the people, or almost telling people that that she is someone that they can be proud of, and she's questioning again his ability to make people proud. And when they look back at this and they look back to see what Donald Trump would do or to what she could have done, if they made the correct decision, she's attempting to make people second guess and wonder if she could make a bigger difference and if they can be proud of her. And she's asking who you want to be, who you can be proud of?
So there's again during Hillary's speech, children with a black background would contrast with what Hillary is represented as, which is the savior, the right candidate, and having again this idea of like the dark atmosphere, even when she's saying it, contrasts with her purpose and of her advertising. But having two children on the sofa with a blanket, almost looking at her in a bed, shows the comfort they have watching Hillary's speech and the comfort they may have by hearing her words. An important image when Hillary is saying this is the young girl who is has smiling and who could be argued to be in her own room. So she's voluntarily looking at Trump. So she's interesting. She wants to hear more. She likes what Hillary is saying. But again, having the lines close kind of contrast with what she would mean that because as we talked last time about it was that the student doesn't have any other information. So the idea that she gives the same meaning when she's talking contrasts with again the purpose that her for her advertising.
So yeah, the final part of the ad was "I'm Hillary Clinton and I approve this message," showing that this was her her ad and her commercial and her way of trying to persuade people and show people really who the two candidates are, because she's afraid almost that Donald Trump is a little overlooked, that his flaws are a little overlooked, and she wants to show that there are flaws to him and there are also flaws to her, but that she will lead to a stronger connection. So that's also her slogan, "Stronger Together." She wants to be more connected in a connected world. So "Stronger Together" is kind of her way of saying that she will be the stronger candidate, and that people can look up to her, and they can look up to her to lead the country.
And what makes her emphasized by the logo that they use by the two white lines, which represent the sign of equal, but just reverse, in the idea that she wished for everyone to be equals, and because as we talked before, that a lot of children that Trump was targeting as the people that would create that would be bad for the society was used in the advertisement. So to show that she did not think that, and that she thinks that everyone is equal, and the children has the an equal opportunity, and also that having the sign, the blue thing, represent to go forward, as opposite to what the first quote of Trump said was like, "I love the old days." So, which contrast Trump's and Hillary's perspective for the next America that will be built, which is she wants to move forward, she wants to change things, and by having her heart on her chest when everyone is everyone applauds, shows that first she's proud and of what the Americans think of her, and also she's proud of being an American, because a lot of arguments when Trump's speech was heard was that they want to go to Canada. Thank you. That they're not proud of their country. They want to leave the country. So the idea that she's doing the sign that is represented when a lot of countries sing their country songs emphasize that, and that
shows the strength of the country.
and and at bottom of the image there is approved by Hillary Clinton, by Hillary for America. Hillary for America is her sponsors, which is interesting that they use this name for them, so it shows that this advertising is not for her, it's not for her campaign, but is for the Americas and just to build a better future, which is linked to the symbol. And you can see at the right bottom that there is the symbol that represents Hillary's campaign through the video to be able to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yes.
There we go.
Okay.
So wrapped up. In conclusion.
So in conclusion, this video had more dislikes than likes. It had a lot of controversy because there was a lot of criticism a lot of criticism when this came out and when she was not elected, but Trump was elected, that her advertising built to her losing the campaign because, as we could observe, by just making the Americans just reflect on what Trump has to say, she's not observed as an offense as a strong candidate, but just has someone who observes it. So it has a strong message, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
it
as you
wasn't
can
represented.
tell, like throughout her ads, they had a lot of stuff taken a little out of context, and they moved it into a context that is more that people would think negatively of Donald Trump. So in a way, she's kind of just slamming on him, trying to make herself look better, and that's why there was a lot of criticism and that's why people almost disliked the video. That's why there were more dislikes than likes on the YouTube video. So it shows that already a majority didn't agree to her ways of advertising herself.
That was very thorough.
That must have been so hard for you to do.